Welcome to Can I Get a Retake, where education meets innovation. Dr. Chantelle MacPhee is Chair of English, Music, and the Arts, as well as Professor of English at St. Leo University, where she teaches students online, at education centers, and on the university's main campus. She earned her bachelor's and master's degrees in English in Canada before completing her PhD in English literature at the University of Glasgow, where her research examined the connections between William Blake and William Shakespeare. Dr. MacPhee's academic interests include British and German Romanticism, cultural studies, academic writing, curriculum design, and female leadership. She is the author of two GRL titles, Effective Communication Bursting the Bubble, and Thinking and Writing Outside the Box, From Classroom to Workplace. Welcome, Dr. MacPhee.
Thank you for joining us today. We do appreciate it. Your path seems really unique. It's taken you from Prince Edward Island to Western Ontario to Glasgow to Puerto Rico and then to Florida. Can you tell us a little bit about what set you on that path?
It's a long story, but I'll try and keep it short. Um, I guess there are many personal and professional elements that factor into who I am and the path I took. I always saw myself from a young age as a professor, and of course, much later on as a department head. My parents were really the most instrumental in shaping my passion for higher education and teaching specifically. I always saw my mom as a teacher, even though she was a stay-at-home mom for over a decade. She raised us. She taught us our empathy, our compassion. She educated us basically from our very first steps to our first words to our first baked dish. So really, she was the teacher of our life skills and the primary steps that lead us to success. For me, that was her superpower, was raising and supporting us and all the crazy things that we were doing. My father's career is the one where he was a music teacher for decades and really shaped not only my teaching ability, but also to really pursue becoming a professor because he taught elementary and what you call middle school in the US and high school, bands and string orchestras. And I loved how he interacted with his students because he also had students at the home who were learning, in private lessons. And I watched him teach them from very basic level to even professional level competition ready students. Um, I also watched him teach music to mental health patients and how that really gave them a voice at times when they really needed one and helped them express how they were feeling. So I guess those were the two really biggest of who I am as a person and a teacher and a leader. Um, in terms of my education, that path is interesting. I initially began um, at the University of Prince Edward Island mainly because I did not graduate high school. I have no high school diploma. I entered the University of Prince Edward Island. We were living there without a high school diploma. I entered early. And I knew it was going to be the arts, which was a great thing in the Canadian system, but I had difficulty really choosing a major. I was like, do I do music? Do I choose history? I just didn't know. And then it was in my junior year, I was taking an introduction to literature course. And it's just like the light bulb went off. Flashcards were coming up, English, English. And I just kind of knew, I think I was reading some poetry and it just kind of clicked for me. And then I went from rural Prince Edward Island with an undergraduate degree to the University of Western Ontario, which is now Western University, because I really wanted to go back to where I had been born. It wasn't London, but it was Ontario, Northern Ontario. And I loved this school and what they had to offer. And it was a one-year program. So I just felt this was a great fit for me. Um, and then I took some time off after Western and really just thought about what do I really want to do? Because if I do a PhD, that's a long commitment and you're kind of overqualified for a lot of things. So I really thought about it. I taught at my alma mater in Prince Edward Island. And then I went to McGill University for a year to study art history, knowing that had been accepted and had accepted the offer to Glasgow University. For me, Glasgow was just a natural progression. I am of Scottish descent, and my paternal grandmother was born in Dundee. And so I just felt Glasgow was just the perfect spot for me. It's a lot more expensive than any university in Canada. But I just felt that if I was going to study British literature, which I was, that this was just absolutely perfect for me and was not too big of a change from where I was in Prince Edward Island as an undergrad. So I realized very quickly, yeah, this was a great place to go. After Glasgow, I kind of nurtured my passion for literature, and I was offered a position at Clemson University in South Carolina, where I was a full-time instructor for about 3 years. But there were no tenure track. And when those student loans come due, and I was like, hey, they're due now. And in Canada, the interest rate was much, much higher. So I knew I had to search, and I was on the job market anyway. And the University of Puerto Rico had an opportunity, and I just read it over and thought, maybe this is where I need to go. Something that's different, that's diverse. I did not speak Spanish except hasta la vista, baby. Um, and I thought, yeah, I can learn other languages. I know German, I know French, I can get by. And I just dove right into it. And I got into the university as an assistant professor, tenure track, and absolutely loved learning Spanish. I immersed in it every day. And it really helped shape the rest of my career in serving populations that are very different, diverse populations, students whose native language may not be English, students who love to learn but struggle with native English pronunciations and things like that. For me, it was just perfect. Um, and then I kind of moved from Puerto Rico to North Carolina at a historically Black college because I just felt that it was a great opportunity. And my husband had returned from Iraq, and we decided to move to his home state, which was North Carolina. And Elizabeth City, again, a diverse opportunity to learn from the students and the faculty and the staff there. And I absolutely loved it. And then we eventually ended up in Florida with Miami first, and then where I am now in the Tampa Bay region. I've had the tremendous fortune of working with some pretty great people. Early in my career, when I was starting out, obviously Richard Cronin, he was my supervisor and perhaps the most influential professor in his support of me throughout my dissertation because I was struggling financially. I was finding work and trying to do different things, and he really encouraged me and guided me. And so for me, it was just a great opportunity to kind of relax about it and not feel the stress. Thereafter, I would definitely have to say Dr. Wayne Chapman from Clemson University. We still talk today. He was the one who hired me as a full-time instructor and kind of introduced me to the United States. I've been here ever since. So I think he was a major influence as well. And then, of course, at the University of Puerto Rico, I have to say Dr. Robert Ross, because he trusted me with an NIH grant, and I was the writing coordinator. And of course, the person who helped hire me, Dr. Aurora Rivera, who sadly has since passed away. And she was really good at navigating things for me and helping me adjust. And probably the other person at Puerto Rico was Rosemary Chaparro, who she ran the lab for ESL, but she really helped me feel confident and competent. She took me in, and just navigating and making me feel comfortable really made a big difference in why I was there. And of course, I think while they've been major influences, I definitely think those particular people earliest in my career have probably influenced me the most.
So with all of your travel, it just sounds extraordinary to me, have you noticed any real differences in how different English speaking cultures relate to writing through your career teaching?
I think the biggest difference for me is the UK. I mean,
Really? How so?
they're the English speaking culture where it kind of started. And Canada and the US have, morphed the language into their own as well. But the UK, I mean, you can catch a train from Glasgow to London and visit the British Library and see some of the world's oldest texts. You can see Shakespeare's original folios and quartos. Let's go to the library. And as a British lit person, I just don't feel like I could get that in Canada or the US. I really felt that the UK was the place. It was just an amazing location. I think the history of the language and literature, it's the UK, but each of the English-speaking countries, I think, are very similar. And they do relate to writing. But one of the things I noticed was Canada and the UK, now that I'm dating myself, when I was in college, um, there were no multiple choice tests. There was no Google. You learned all the intricacies of how do you find information quickly? How do you think outside the box to resolve a problem? And all of those things were very, very strong. It was just a very different cultural experience with regards to writing. And of course, writing is so dominant in the UK because of all of the writers, Shakespeare, Milton, Marlowe. I mean, the list is endless. I think those are some of the best differences that I saw that impacts, writing evolution. Canada's is the nature and the natural world and its impact and the environment. Um, Whereas the US is, yes, they have it, but it's a little older than Canadian literature. The UK is the oldest of the three. So I think that there are these ways that say what defines you is, you know, when I look at, oh, what would it well, Huckleberry Finn. You don't have that in Canada, but you do have Indigenous peoples' culture very heavily at the forefront, and the important role they've played in the founding of Canada. So I think that writing really shapes a country's identity, and it's all a little bit different depending on how you tell the story.
You, your PhD was in English Romanticism, and I'm curious, Shakespeare and the Romantics are very different worlds, separated by sensibilities, besides centuries. So what pulled you towards them? And maybe what does each give you that or students that the other doesn't?
Hmm. Um, it actually came about, it was kind of that creative spark that I love. I was enrolled in my master's degree. I was taking 2 classes in Shakespeare and 2 in Romantics, in the Romantic period. And I just started reading all these Shakespeare plays and all this Romantic poetry and started seeing similarities, particularly, not so much with Wordsworth Coleridge, although it's there, Blake and Shakespeare, of all things. And for me, I just saw that while Blake's major influence is Milton, no doubt about it, I just started seeing a lot of like, oh, I see a little bit of Henry V here. Oh, I see a little bit of Hamlet and King Lear in terms of leadership, in terms of, Blake's prophetic poems. I think what really captures me with Shakespeare is the cultural context he provides, which is ever reaching. We still have it today. His use of poetry and prose for characters, the way in which he can turn a line or a phrase, the themes that seem to be universal, and complex. I mean, even what a comedy can be extremely complex with relationships. I think that for Shakespeare really talked to me, especially Henry V. For some reason, I really loved Henry V and We Happy Band of Brothers, partly because it wasn't quite at that time, but it just seemed like this, we're all going on the battlefield and we're going to be fighting, but we're not, you're always going to be remembered. And I'm summarizing. But for me, it was that really played a major role for me. I think the Romantics is where I really fell in love with them, was that for Blake in particular, it was not just the poetry, which some of it is, I would not argue, is the best poetry in the world. I think that's too general. But what I loved about it was that you could read his poetry and see his engravings all at the same time. And so the world of imagery and symbolism just is wide open. It's got a context, but it's really you looking at it, reading it, trying to understand it, understanding the cultural influences, and then keeping it open by saying, well, it could be this, but it could be this. And I just love that about the Romantics. I think the fact that whether it's naturally oriented in the environment, situated in the environment, or whether it's friendships or leadership, it's still, or prophetic or religious, it's all embedded heavily in imagery and symbolism, which I absolutely love. So I think that while Shakespeare definitely has always had a very major influence on me, I would have to say that Blake's symbolism and imagery, with Shakespeare, I think just made it perfect for me.
I don't think we give enough credence to the thought that Blake would take inspiration from Shakespeare. I think we just have it very cataloged. Shakespeare was in this era, Blake was in this era. So I appreciate the thought that they're connected through time. What is it about Blake that kind of refuses to age for you? And what do you think, like, when you're teaching it or other people are reading it, what are they missing?
I don't know that you say what they're missing for me is like, are you missing it? Or is it just that there's so much there, it's going to take a lifetime to unearth?
Yes.
But I think for me, Blake's symbolism and imagery is that creative, imaginative spirit. It's the authenticity of who he is as a poet and an engraver. And I think today, especially with AI playing a role, that's ever more important that we don't forget that it's the imaginative spirit, it's the authenticity of that, it's the creative spark, it's curiosity, that all of that can never be replaced. It's not limitable, it's limitless. It's all based on an individual's personal imaginative spirit and how they are interpreting things, and not one machine or one machine capturing all the data sets that make it something. It's not going to ever be limited. I think Hegel and Blake would definitely agree to that.
You mentioned briefly AI.
Yes.
There's a worry out there that, and we see it here, that AI will flatten writing into some kind of just polished sameness. Are you seeing that yet in student work? And if you are, what does that look like?
Oh, am I ever? I think one of the biggest challenges is that students, when pressure hits, they run to AI because it's easy. They've grown up, unlike me, they have grown up in a generation that is bombarded with information overload. It's Google has everything at your fingertips, and if not Google, somebody else will. But certainly, information is extremely easy. You search, done. But then you get 150,000 hits and you have to try and figure out how to narrow it down. And AI is helping them do that. But AI is the works that I've seen produced, they lack that creative curiosity that is so important in writing. It's very similar, it's very dry, it's very drab, it's very bland. And I try to tell students, AI can help you create with information overload. It is good. Let's say you have a topic, which for me is academic writing or research. I always tell students, what do you like? And they'll say, oh, I like criminal justice. Okay, what about it? I want to talk about crime scenes. Okay, what about crime scenes? And so we start really the conversation there. I do have them use AI to help them navigate topics, but I always tell them, remember, it's a machine. That yes, it is taking huge amounts of data and is compiling them all and popping opportunities. But you still have to understand, because maybe, just maybe, that creative spark will give you a revolutionary viewpoint that no one's thought about. That's not going to come from AI. That's going to come from your brain processing whatever it is that you're able to find on a particular topic. I think the biggest thing too is I always tell them, you want to learn. Seeking perfection is great, but we are inherently flawed as individuals. We're supposed to be. There's nothing wrong with having flaws, but how do you learn from them? And writing is not something you can just do in 0.001 seconds with AI. It's a lifelong pursuit. How do you expand on these topics? How do you narrow it? How do you focus maybe on a different direction? And I think the fact that writing is not perfection, it is not, because you're dealing with the human experience, and that is not perfection. That is flawed. So I think the power of writing, I try to really instill in them, is that sameness is boring. Sameness, identical, no. And so I think that that's the most important part, is don't replace authenticity because you want to be flawless, because then you lose your voice, and your voice in amongst a whole bunch of others will mean nothing. Try to keep it so that you still have the power of that and still have a voice in amongst all the myriad of others that are going to dominate.
If a genre like romanticism is tied to industrialization, and if we're going through maybe a similar revolution right now when it comes to AI and technology, what would you say, kind of looking into the future, your knowledge of current writing, what kind of genre are we stepping into at the moment?
I think that the genre itself, just like any revolution, is morphing.
Hmm.
But is it going to replace writing? No. Because if you think about it, medical doctors, and my brother's a medical doctor, so the amount of writing he does per day with doctor's notes and all of that is enormous. My other brother's a researcher, so he's constantly writing, and he's also a department head, constantly writing. I'm a department head. I'm constantly writing. I'm writing reports. I'm examining data and trying to determine what's the next steps. I'm writing support letters for students who are moving on in their, whether it's for a job or whether it's for graduate school. I think that we can't forget that AI is there, but writing itself, it's just changing. Social media, I mean, the social media influencer, for example, is a good example of someone who you want to write something quickly and fast. Are some of them using AI? Probably. I don't know. I'm not a social media influencer, but I'm assuming that some of it is that. But do you want a voice as a social media influencer? I certainly don't want someone who has the same voice as everybody else. I want someone who's going to create, maybe it's a podcast about traveling, maybe it's a podcast about literature, maybe it's a podcast about life experiences. I don't want it the same old, same old. I won't read past the first line. You've got to interest me and excite me about it, and it's got to be authentic. Um, and AI can certainly help with grammar and punctuation and ideas. But if you replace authenticity and your authentic voice, I think that it does do severe damage because AI's challenge is that people use it and then they don't check. I've literally seen it. They do it, they hand it in, and then they don't realize they've made some mistakes because it's clear. I mean, it even says AI. You're like, you might want to edit. But the problem is that there's so many students now who are coming out into a workforce that is going to have some kind of AI function in the job that they do. So we're not going to escape it, but we have to learn to adapt and adapt the writing genres as well.
That is part of the scary part of AI, though, is you do have a lot of people who are turning to it as an emotional crutch, despite its inability to feel empathy. So
But I think
that's
it's also turning us away from people.
yes,
And I
agreed.
think that's very dangerous. My concern, and it's just a concern I have with AI, is that why don't we talk to someone, put our phones down, have a conversation, a real conversation. If you're struggling with mental health issues, I wouldn't want AI dictating anything. I would want a person that I can really trust, or, a psychologist or someone that I could go to that I could feel I could unearth something and have that connection. In my view, I want to see studies in 20 years with, if they only, stay at home and stay with AI and don't do any thinking, what does their brain look like?
Right.
Their brain has to be used. Now, how much of it? I'm not a brain expert, but I will say that it does concern me that this could have long-term effects on us as a person, as health-wise, just so many variables we just don't know yet.
You mentioned authenticity when it comes to AI. And so, got a scenario that I want to run by you. Maybe you've run into this already, but say a student told you that they used AI to draft a paper, but then they turned around and they revised every line themselves. Would you call that still their writing? And where do you draw the line?
Oh, that's a conversation that I'm on several groups with. We're still trying to define what that is. I think for me, if it were my writing class, I would say, no, you cannot do that. I try to very specifically open AI to them for very specific tasks. And I have them write in class. A lot of my faculty um, are having them do that. And we're finding that we're getting better work. We're getting more interesting work, interesting ideas, not the standard, we're getting more the authentic voice. And yes, we have conversations with them, and it's easier to have a conversation than, when someone does an AI and you ask them, well, what does this word mean? They're like, okay, what's this word? And what does this really mean? It's a little vague. Can you give me examples? And then they can't. I think that's dangerous. And while AI can help, I think it's very dangerous to rely entirely on it, because mistakes can be made by machines too.
That's very true. I came across today, I had an author generate an HTML little interactive, but it wasn't built in any way that would be accessible. So someone who is on a screen reader or someone who is deaf, they wouldn't be able to interact with it.
Right.
Yeah. There's all those little micro decisions you have to make as a human to make sure that the work is built correctly and can be consumed by as many people as possible. So
Exactly. Because I would hate to miss out on a student who maybe is seeing impaired or hearing impaired. I don't want them to struggle when all I had to do was think about it. And I think it also lends to empathy. You start thinking about, how can this help someone who's seeing impaired? What do I need to do to make it, accessible? I think that then creates that sense of empathy, and you're not even realizing it.
We do a lot with all of our titles to make sure that we're keeping accessibility at the forefront of our mind, all of our considerations, because we do
Absolutely.
think if every student is paying the same price, they need the same amount of access. They should get the same amount of value.
Absolutely.
Kind of picking up a topic you broached earlier about how so many people are constantly writing throughout the day. We're texting, we're posting, we're commenting, we're captioning. Even in, our daily life, we're writing emails. How do we get more people to understand that writing is a fundamental life skill that they need in order to succeed?
For me, what I try to do is tell them every marketing proposal, every social media post. Well, I think social media is a good example. If I make a mistake on a social media post and I just used AI to build it and didn't think about it, and the language I'm using and the tone, that can be catastrophic for any social influencer. And so I think it's important that while you can use AI for ideas, for me, it can create a spark, right? Whenever I've used it and thrown some stuff in, some ideas, I don't use any of their ideas, but they generated that I have a spark that goes, well, yeah, they're not related, but I'm going to do this because, oh my God, I never thought of this. So it can be inspiring to some extent to use, but I think one of the dangers of all the writing we do is that it's a superpower. I mean, it's every verb, every adjective, every adverb. If you're marketing, if you're social media influencer, if you're posting, if you're doing any captions, if you're doing anything, you have to be very aware and empathetic to your audience. You have to understand who they are. And that authentic voice, I think, is really appreciated by social media influencer watchers who constantly are looking on the pages and taking advice. Unearthing new perspectives, I think, is really important. So writing, I think, is very important overall, and teaching it as a tool, but also as a pursuit, that it doesn't end when you graduate. It doesn't end when you finish English 121 or 122 at St. Leo. It continues, and you're going to be writing research papers, or you're going to be doing research for a company. There's always writing going on. And if you want to be promoted, you have to write. And AI is a tool, but I like to use this analogy where I have a rake, but a rake doesn't dig. AI is a tool, but it doesn't do everything.
Yeah, thank you for that breakdown. That's really helpful. Going back to the teaching of English to English as a second language students, how do you have to approach teaching maybe the same topic, poem, play differently to that secondary language audience versus English as a primary language?
Puerto Rico taught me it very quickly. What I found was that students loved to learn in the classes, but I had to rethink how to teach it. You're not dumbing it down. You're rethinking, okay, if they don't know this word, what's a word I can use to help them understand it? Help them build their vocabulary once you build a foundation. So I spent a lot of time really rethinking how I was teaching basic functions. So like when I taught ESL, it was grammar. It was the rules, right? What are the rules in English? What are the rules that help you function, at least on a basic level, where you can now go into college-ready English? If there's one thing that Spanish has, it is a Latin language. And so I usually tell them, actually, that word is Latin. So you're not wrong. Just drop this, add this, and now you've got the word. And we worked a lot on, I would say, punctuation, because the punctuation is quite different. But writing, it was like write as much as you can, but also I had them watching movies, not in class, but at home. I said, get a movie, watch it with English subtitles. Watch the rhythm of the language, which I think is very important. Sometimes I would choose a musical piece, but I tried to find words that in music help them lyrics, and said, if you can read these, now let's read them and really think about them and what they mean. So we did spend a lot of time on vocabulary, I won't lie, and reading. I had them read out loud because the accents are different. So we often had those kinds of conversations. And I also, to help them feel more comfortable, I felt it was really important that I learn Spanish. And I told them 5 minutes each class at the beginning, you're going to teach me some basic words. And I found that it motivated both of us, me to pick up a language that I was starting to learn, and them feeling more comfortable with it. I was trying to learn theirs, so they were trying to learn mine. And I mean, all those students that I taught in Puerto Rico have done so well. I am super proud of them. I mean, they've got careers all over the United States and Puerto Rico, doing great things. So I think a lot of it is making them feel comfortable with learning a language first. And I think that helps the student, especially reading it out loud. I felt that reading aloud helped them gain confidence, that one or two or three words mispronounced is not a big deal. So little things like that become important, they tend to relax. And once you relax, you can learn pretty much anything.
So I'm going to jump another question really quick, kind of going off what you just said. It's a tangent, but when you're teaching, like I know that Shakespeare's modern English, it came after the great vowel shift, etc. But still the language is very different for modern students. How do you acclimate them to the nuances and the differences between that society and ours and that version of the language and ours?
I mean, there are so many ways that you can get help with understanding, but to me, if you're an English major, you need to understand the language. And part of that is just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't learn it. I think going to the very basics is really important. And you don't have to understand every single nuance, even we don't. That's why Shakespeare is still being studied in Shakespeare, to understand and appreciate what he produces as a drama or as a poem. And I'll give you an example. Sonnet 116 is one of my favorites, and I'll read a couple lines, or I'll recite a couple lines. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. When I teach that sonnet, and that's only a couple lines, I remind them that if there's no punctuation at the end of the line, you keep going, because the line is not complete. The thought is not complete. But I also tell them to look for key elements. Love is not love. Oops, love and not love. I think we're going to have a comparison in this sonnet. What's a sonnet? 14 lines, typically. There's a volta, line 9 or 13. So using a method to then take it apart helps. You're not necessarily going to understand every single word, but it's the beauty of that gets you saying, but I understand the main ideas that can spur inspiration for leadership. I mean, Henry V is a pretty darn good leader in Shakespeare's plays. He, in two plays prior, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, he's in the pub having a blast.
Yep.
But he's learning. He's watching. He's observing the people he will rule one day. And that's the key to him becoming an effective leader in Henry V. And going on the battlefield at the battle and saying, "We happy band of brothers, who in thy flowing cups will always be remembered." And I think that's really important in that respect. And also understanding the power of his language, because we still use it. All's well that ends well, from the play of the same name. There are just so many examples of it that you don't have to understand every single thing, and that's okay. It's understanding, what do you get from it that's the most important.
So kind of bringing it around to what's going to be ahead for you and what your goals are. What are you working on now, or maybe thinking toward, that you haven't quite said out loud yet?
Well, I've traveled a lot. I've traveled a lot. I've lived in many different, very different, diverse places. And one of the things I am thinking about is either a radio spot or a podcast on traveling and how to navigate, because I've camped in the middle of nowhere. I have slept in my car at the bottom of the Swiss Alps. But also understanding that there are so many great, I just came back from Greece with my son, and we had 10 days of nonstop walking. We saw as many temples of Poseidon and Apollo and Zeus that we could possibly cram in all of the wonderful mythology and history that Greece presented. And I'd love to be able to say to someone who wants to go, you can go for cheap. I've done it. I don't go and spend huge amounts of money. I plan, I check things out, I figure out what I want to do, what's important to me, and how I get there. But I'm not really sure when that's going to happen. But that's something I would love to do. And I love to help students find that path if they want to go overseas, even if it's for a semester. How do you do it? I know how to do it. I've done it. And there have been some great opportunities that I've had that I wouldn't trade for anything.
I tell that to all of my interns that come in. I really encourage them to, even if it is for a semester, to go out and explore that, because it is really a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, there are lots of places in the US that you can go. You don't have, if
Mhm.
overseas is too scary, start with something in the US. There's so many wonderful parks and lots of historical sites to see. I mean, I've been to a lot of states, and one of them I really enjoyed was actually just North Carolina and the mountains, and just experiencing quiet and nature, and just go, this is magnificent. This is exactly what I would love to enjoy without any disruption. And I turn off my phone when I go travel. I only check when I'm back at the hotel.
I actually miss those days when the Wi-Fi wouldn't work or you didn't have a data plan, because then everyone, you and your entire travel group, you were just living in the moment.
Yes.
But
And I think that that's something we can't forget. I mean, when I went to Greece, my son and I never looked at our phones. We left them at the I brought my phone because I needed it for certain things, but I never looked at it. I kept it on silent mode and airport mode. I only ever looked at it when we got back to the hotel, and it made our experience on the buses and everything fantastic. I mean, when we went to places, we knew about them, we had read about them, and when we got there, it was like, wow, it's so different when you see it in person. And the Meteora monasteries were just spectacular. And you miss too much when you have your phone on all the time.
Yes, the missing too much because you're not paying attention to what you should be.
And I think that's where the work-life balance came in during COVID, which I had never heard up until COVID. It's like it wakes you up and you realize there are times when you just have to turn your phone off. There are times when you need to take a break and just enjoy the silence. There's nothing wrong with it.
enjoy the nice days when we have them. Yes.
Absolutely. Unless you're in Florida and you boil to death.
As we're getting to towards the end, we do like to ask a question, which is just, it gives you an opportunity to kind of rant about something that is a miscommunication or a misunderstanding in your field of expertise. Is there a pet peeve that you have or something that you would like to set the record straight for when it comes to the English language, teaching English, etc.?
I think too many news outlets, media outlets, careers need English majors more than ever. AI will never understand empathy, compassion without, I mean, English majors are invaluable. In fact, they're looking for English majors to help train AI. It's invaluable. It's not something that you just turn away from. Everything that you write well gets you a promotion. I think you lose a part of yourself if you don't take your writing seriously to the point where you get inspired and you have curiosity to help guide you. Even musicians write, they write lyrics. And so when I'm listening to music, I'm always listening to the message. What are they really saying? What is the music trying to capture for me? They've got dissonance. What does dissonance mean? Is it sad? Is it happy? Is it joy? Not, definitely not happy or joy. But is it sad? But what level of sadness? Is it despair? And I think that it also keeps us healthy mentally, physically. I think it also, the Greek guy, Giorgio, who I will call out on this, and he said to us that the humanities are an essential part of the circle of life. And for me, I completely, 100% agree, but also it's what keeps us sane in an insane world of information overload, where we can be in touch with our emotions, be in touch with who we are, be in touch and have ideas and inspiration, and it's okay. And I hope that people don't forget that this work-life balance, a lot of it is humanities based. And it's essential, I think, especially today for students who have so much information overload, and I didn't have that much when I was a student, that it can be daunting. Absolutely daunting.
It's interesting. I feel like there's two conflicting parts of society. You have half saying work-life balance, but now you look at the tech industry and you have the 996 model that's happening. So it's interesting and kind of frightening to see which wins out,
Yeah. I think that there's always room for both. For those people who want who want the 996, let them have it. But there are people who also don't want that, and there should be options for them that are just as well paying. But I think that's what people forget. It's okay to have different models and use different models in life. I have an MBA and I learned a lot, but when I marketed with empathy, compassion, and inspiration. And that was not taught in a business model, that was taught in a humanities model. And we have to remember that when things get tough, where do people go? They read or they watch, they listen to music. But music can be healing, just as poetry can be healing for someone who's frustrated. But don't forget that there are a lot of people, especially myself as a single mom, I want a model that's flexible. I can still work long hours. My son's grown now, but when he was younger, it was tough and it was very difficult. I made it because I had flexibility. That's the nature of the job I had. So at the time, so, it works itself out.
That was great. This has been just an absolutely delightful hour.
I had a bit of a health issue while I was writing the book, the book, and I told him, I said, I don't know, I've got to take at least, I was behind because of it. And I said, just give me some time. And I worked on myself and started working on tricks and things to help out. And once I was better, I think I wrote 5 chapters in 1 week.
Wow.
I just got inspired and went, done. Yeah. I'll have it done by the end of the week. And I had it done.
That's awesome.
And I think that's how I work. And again, I'm not everybody, but I like the fact that I had the flexibility, and Tim gave me that, and GRL gave me that, to say, here's the end deadline. But within that, sometimes I didn't get it done, but they didn't panic. They just said, when can you get it to us? And I'm like, I'm going to really try. Sometimes it didn't happen, but when it happened, I knew. I was like, okay, the deadline's coming. I have to get this done. And I just all of a sudden just took off with it. And I got on a roll, and I know myself. When you get on a roll, you don't stop. So I rolled it because I'd had it in my head for 30 years of teaching. And so it was sitting there percolating. And as I started to develop the book, I already knew what I wanted to put in it. So I think that's what people forget. Often it's not putting your fingers to a keyboard or pencil to paper. It's you're thinking about it and running it over in your head and running scenarios in your head and then making notes. And then you go, got it. And then you take off. At least that's me.
I see a lot of that.
But the product ended up really great because the students have enjoyed, the scaffolded text. I'm adding a new AI component into the course shell, which I hope to update into the book at some point. But for now, it's more just teaching them that AI isn't the big bad machine, but you are going to be entering, whether you like it or not, it's here. And we've got to be, especially them, have got to be extra prepared because they're going to be expected to know some of it, at least the basics.
It is interesting when we have college students that work with us who say, my professor won't let us touch this at all. They're going to enter a business world or a work world where they're going to have, to learn pretty quick. It's going to be a steep learning curve for them.
Especially, I think business in particular is really going to be a steep curve. And again, as I took the MBA, I could see where AI would make a huge impact in the business world. And it's scary as a humanities person, not gonna lie. But I think that if we keep it authentic and people still have the writing skills, they can be in control and not AI. And I refuse to give up control to AI. I'm sorry, not gonna happen. Because I want my authenticity, I want my integrity in place, and I want my inspiration, my spark. It's exciting. It's exciting to get an idea and go, yes, okay, that might not work, but I still had the idea. Because you gain confidence in yourself.
Is there anything that we didn't capture that you want on the record that you want us to include?
I think the only thing I would say is that teaching is an art form. It is not an AI form. It is an art form. It requires a lot of empathy and compassion, especially since COVID. It requires extreme patience with some students. But the reward is that watching those students walk at the end of 4 years is really exciting. That sense of I've watched them grow as a student. And yes, some are 4.0s and some barely scraped by, but they did it. And I think that's an important thing that AI will never be able to replicate.
Thanks for listening to Can I Get a Retake, a podcast by Great River Learning. If you liked the episode, show your support by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a review. For show notes and transcripts, visit greatriverlearning.com. Can I Get a Retake is brought to you by hosts Michelle Manneman and Deanna Plussel. Our show is produced and edited by Michaela Albee. Artwork for the podcast is crafted by Michelle Manneman, and our intro music is courtesy of Comma Media. We'll be back with another insightful chat with a GRL author or expert. Stay tuned, and we'll see you soon.